ladies and gentlemen, my next guest is Adam. He is a PhD student at the University of Utah, specializing in philosophy, and he also has a background in science. That's what brought him to philosophy, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we're just talking off air about science, where it's going, and how people conduct science, and how much of a mess it is.
Yeah.
In some cases, it actually works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, First of all, can you tell me more about? You said something earlier about science, and it has more to do not with the research itself, but it has more to
Oh.
do with the culture. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So we can kind of start with maybe the simple picture of what science is, where you have a person goes into a lab, they use the scientific method, they study something, they have a hypothesis, they try and prove it wrong. If they can't, then the hypothesis gets accepted as basically true until it's proven wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then new evidence can support it or go against it. And whatever the evidence says, that's what you do. Right? That's how science works. That's how we think it works.
That's how we think it works.
Thinks it
per
works.
se. Well, it does work here for like tangible things, like rocket science.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really work that well for like consciousness, because it's very, very hard to measure that.
Oh, it's extremely hard to measure. Yes. So there's also so we have that simple picture of that's how science is evidence based.
The scientific research method. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how it goes, and that's kind of the end of the story. And then in philosophy, anyway, there's a guy named Thomas Kuhn, Kuhn. He wrote a book in the 1960s called "The Structure of Scientific Revolutions," and he coined the term paradigm shift. I'm sure you've heard that term.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's where it came from. And he was a physicist who was really interested in the history of physics and eventually became kind of a philosopher, historian of science, and specifically physics, though he didn't really look at any other science. And in his book, he makes this sort of claim about how science progresses. So he takes the two models of our solar system, where the Earth is at the center of the solar system, versus the sun. And you can imagine back in history, most people believed that the Earth was the center of the solar system. And then we had this new model, of the sun being the center. And as evidence got more and more for that, there came a time when there was about equal evidence for both. But you can't both be right.
No, you can't both be right. So what changed it?
So what do you do? So Kuhn says that what happens is basically scientists get political. So you try and win people over to your side. And some of the tools that he thinks people use is fruitful research can be done, or like new puzzles. So if you say, hey, look, this new model has all these interesting questions and puzzles, and if you accept this new model, you'll be able to do a bunch of research that's new, and you'll be able to find stuff.
Can you go as far as say you could use fear as a way?
I mean, you certainly could.
Are you trying to win over different scientists, or are you trying to win over like just the general population?
This is within scientists.
Oh, this is within scientists.
So
okay,
the evidence
okay,
is about the same.
Okay.
And you don't really know where to go. Some people say, well, actually, you point to what are called like epistemic virtues, or like epistemic or epistemology being about knowledge.
Uh-huh.
And so things like efficiency or simplicity or different things like that will make a theory more enticing. If it explains more, or if it does so without, while assuming less, then that's like a better theory.
Okay.
But assuming that they're about the same,
Mm-hmm.
I'm having some trouble with the connection. Let's try again in a moment.
I don't know what that was.
No,
Go ahead.
That's fine. No, so if they're about the same, then you have to ask, or not you have to, but Kuhn says that what happens is scientists basically try to win each other over with things like, hey, or by saying to maybe the other side that's like, no, the Earth is the center of the solar system. The other people would say, yeah, I get that you think that, but if you accept this new model where the sun is the center, look at all these new puzzles you get to solve and all this new research you get to do. And scientists like puzzles to solve. That's what science is.
Unless they're old and and they've been solving the same puzzle for 30 years, and technically they've solved it, and they're kind of fixated on that.
Yeah, and they get and so there's Kuhn distinguishes between normal science and revolutionary science. So
Okay.
normal science is you're within a paradigm. Paradigm meaning sort of just a basic set of theories that you apply to. So his example is like the Newtonian paradigm versus the Einstein paradigm with relativity. So with Newton, you had sort of like more of the, I guess now, basic physics. And when you're working within the Newtonian paradigm, there's questions and there's things you don't know. And so you're solving those puzzles. That's normal science. And then when you run into puzzles that your science can't solve, that's a problem. But if it's just like one or two, fine. Your paradigm still explains most everything.
Okay.
But as those start to build, it seems like there's something fundamentally wrong with your paradigm. And so you need a paradigm shift. And then that's when revolutionary science comes in, and you have people trying to create this new paradigm. And you would have something like Einstein's relativity creates this new paradigm, and people switch over to that. And
Okay.
yeah, that's kind of Kuhn's idea of how science
Okay.
changes
Kind of like
over time.
quantum mechanics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
There's a lot of stuff they don't understand, but they're like it works, but they still can't explain it till this very day.
yeah. So it explains. I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about physics really, but so it explains certain things that the past paradigms couldn't, and because of that explanatory power, people pick it. And then maybe another reason is there's still things we don't know about it, so scientists gets to do all this research on it,
Okay.
and they get to keep doing their science.
Okay. But why is it that other scientists that have been doing research on something, and then someone comes in, like you said, proves them wrong after they've done like 10, 15 years of like research papers, they've taught about it, they got a PhD in that topic, and they're like, no, I don't accept you, even though they're wrong, or it's proving that they're wrong. They don't even bother acknowledging it in some cases.
Yeah, no, it's a serious problem. And just like with any sort of anything that's done by humans, it's not going to be
Yeah.
perfect. And like you said, egos get in the way a lot.
Yeah, a lot, brother, a lot. Like I feel like
Um,
the identity, the emotions, egos get in the way, and that's something that's swaying science. So
Yeah.
people don't want to be wrong. Like especially if you've invested 10 years and 20 years in the same
Yeah.
research, you don't want to be wrong. But I feel like science should be non-biased, man. Like
Yeah.
we should just see what happens. But
Yeah.
when you talk to a lot of scientists, I don't know. There's some egos in there.
There's a lot of
There's
egos. I mean,
I'm being
um,
little.
there's a lot of biases too. They don't even necessarily have to be egos, but just certain people prefer certain things more, and you can even be biased towards different epistemic things. So you might be like, I really like simplicity. If
Right.
it's a simple theory, I like it more. And somebody might go, oh, well, this one explains more, but it's more complicated. I like explanation more than simplicity.
Mhm.
And they're both arguing on epistemic or knowledge-based grounds, but they disagree because they just sort of like, people inherently like certain things over others, or maybe it's how they were trained, or
Right.
different things like that. So there's a lot.
I mean, if you like simplicity, then there's less to argue about, right? Because it's
Yeah.
simple and it works.
That's
That's what Einstein said, at least.
Einstein, it's Stephen Hawking, all the sort of famous physicists and a lot of the pop culture physicists.
Yeah.
They're looking for the one equation where you can sum up all of the laws of the universe in one equation,
I highly doubt that.
right? And
I
like,
highly doubt
so
that. Yeah.
to your point, it's like that would be incredible. That's a cool idea. But why are you like? Science shouldn't be about here's the goal I have in mind. How do I get to it?
Yeah.
It should be, what's true or what explains things.
Yeah, that's
the
why I have you on the
best.
podcast, dude.
Yeah, and there's lots of
That's why I started podcast, literally.
yeah, and so
Yeah.
there's in more of science we could go either there's debates on whether or not values should be involved in science or not and how they play a role specifically in the science research, or also more like hardcore like older philosophy of science. There's debates on whether or not science is actually even discovering things about the real world.
Yeah, that's next level. Why do you think people, or not people, scientists don't like studying like magic? It's a bit taboo in the scientific community. like Reiki, all this other stuff, when
Yeah.
there's actually scientific research that proves that some of this stuff is actually true. Not all of it,
Yeah.
but even like a remote viewing. Do you know what that is?
I think so. Is that where someone sort of like goes out of their body?
No, that's
No.
what they call it. That's out of body experience.
Okay.
Yeah. It's where you could know something is something beyond space and time. Where there's a
Oh.
movie called Third Eye Spy, or if you heard of it, it's called The Men Who Stare at Goats with George Clooney.
Oh, I've heard. I've not seen it, but I've
Yeah. Well, the military was working with that, so they've invested a lot of money, so it works to a certain extent. But like scientists are like, nah, I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
There's too many anomalies, though.
There's a lot of anomalies,
Right.
and it's hard to you can't really put it under scientific conditions. I think a lot of science. I don't know if you've ever heard.
But that's the problem. The scientific method doesn't really work when it comes to stuff like that. So they're like, oh, we're just going to deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
but that's not science. But that's, I mean,
well,
I guess
I
that's not
mean,
the.
science is done according to like certain norms and standards, and that's the scientific method.
Right.
So if if it falls out of that scope, so there's you get debates with like religion on whether science can prove or disprove God, or something crazy like that.
That's not going to happen.
And I think the right answer is when it comes to something like whether like science deals with the material world. So if you're asking questions about the immaterial,
Yeah.
science fundamentally cannot tell you if that's true or not. It just goes, I don't know.
Right, but shouldn't you like dig deeper?
If you can have access to it, but like if you're talking about I mean, I don't know what exactly.
I'm talking about like metaphysical and
Yeah,
things like
so
that.
if you're trying to-
you don't have access.
You
to
can't
it, for
hook
sure.
a meter up to a soul or a
Yeah,
spirit.
there's no way. Then you have to argue: does a person have a soul? Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and so
yeah.
if there's no way to do that, then science just kind of has to be like, I don't know.
Yeah, but there's other things like the placebo effect.
Yeah.
Which it's happened to me. It's happened to a lot of other people. They've tricked themselves of healing themselves.
Oh yeah.
Like it's just like, wow, this actually works. But wouldn't you want to share that with the general population? Find out what it is, what's the mechanics behind it, what's the mental processing of the person, and that's telling their mind or their subconscious body that, hey, I'm
Yeah.
getting healthy, and guess what? They actually get healthy.
Yeah, so I think there's a distinction between something that falls outside of the scope of the scientific method and something that like scientists just don't want to study.
Yeah.
And there is an aversion to different things for some reason. So there's now really interesting stuff that again I don't know really much about it, but
Yeah.
Having people meditate under an MRI and you can see what happens in their brain.
I've done that.
Yeah, and you can,
Actually on the podcast.
yeah,
Yeah.
So you can you can take someone who's never done it, who's done it for like 2 years, and then you can bring in like somebody who's been a monk for 30 years,
Yeah.
and you can see the physical changes in the brain, and so that all of a sudden, boom, science can latch onto that. They can see it, they can quantify it, they can
Right.
talk about it.
Doesn't that bring us back to the technology? Because 50 years ago, when you would talk about meditation, how it would help people, they'd just be like, get out of here. That's BS.
Yeah.
Now it's like everyone's open to doing it.
Yeah, yeah, because again, you have the technology, you can literally see
Yeah, you
with
can.
your own eyes, right?
Yeah.
And that's huge. Somebody can say, "Oh yeah, I meditated. Like I had anxiety or I had this or I had that, and then I meditated for like 10 minutes a day, and I did that for a month, and I feel considerably less anxious." But that's just some guy's story. It doesn't mean that it works.
Right.
And so you have to be able. But when you can actually test it under scientific conditions and with being able to see it and all of that, then all of a sudden, there's more reliability to the claims, and also more scientists are willing to do it.
Okay. Got it. Cool. Got it. So your specialty is genetics, the ethics of genetics.
Yeah, that's something I'm really interested in. So
Tell us a little more about it.
Yeah, my interest in it came kind of, I guess, senior year in high school. I don't remember how things. I think I read just like a random, sort of like a popular science book
Yeah,
about
or article probably.
genetics. Yeah, and I just was like, this is fascinating that these little tiny things. I also before that I had a big interest in like viruses and bacteria, because it's like,
Nice.
how do these little tiny things affect, big creatures like us, and could devastate societies, and then with genes, like it helps build people, like how, like that's insane.
Yeah.
So with that, I went into undergraduate as a genetics major, and then added philosophy just kind of for fun because
Okay.
I thought it was interesting.
Cool. Yeah, it
I,
is interesting.
I took it my first semester, like just an intro ethics class, and the professor was like, "Oh, you can get a major in this." I was like, "That sounds great." And so now here I am doing philosophy instead of science. But yeah, so sort of like the science of genetics is super interesting, but also now with genetic technologies, there's so many ways we can use them for good or bad, and
Yeah.
how do we regulate that? And
How do we regulate that? I mean, like honestly, like if someone's family is predispositioned to have like sickle cell anemia or Huntington's disease or something that's going to severely like cripple them in life
yeah,
or even kill them at a young age, yeah, definitely get in, erase that gene or
yeah,
pull it out. I don't know what you would do.
yeah,
Like you know,
yeah,
like
yeah,
make sure that gene is not activated.
yeah,
Um, Definitely. But then again, if you want to turn around and say, hey, you know what? The military wants to make super soldiers, people that are very intelligent, very sharp. They can run faster, longer than everyone else, and they're very aggressive.
yeah.
And we just want to breed that.
And you
That's
get
going to turn into, and they're highly intelligent. That's going to turn into a shit show.
designer babies. I want my child to be this, that, and the other thing. And you know, one big worry is that this technology starts out being very expensive. So it's usually only the wealthy people that
For now, yeah,
c-
for
can,
now,
can get it.
yeah.
And then, most people in America that are really wealthy are typically white. So they're going to be having all these advantages of being able to make their kids smarter, taller.
Dude, that's the least of my worries.
um,
That's like
well, yeah,
skin color is the
if,
least of the
if you're
worries.
worried about
Like I'm thinking next level. Well, think about this: really rich people want their kids to be like Einstein super geniuses
yeah.
and also ruthless investment bankers. Dude, they're just gonna take all the money and they're just gonna
Yeah.
become even richer. And what's gonna happen to the middle class and the poor? They're just gonna get poor, despite your skin color. That's not even on my radar.
Yeah, no, rich doesn't care too much at a certain point.
I mean, yeah. I mean,
obviously there's
depends. I met a lot of rich people, but they're not like filthy rich.
yeah,
They're just rich.
they're not billionaires.
Billionaire
Yeah,
rich. Yeah, I don't think. I mean that to that extent, I don't know why people need that much money really.
yeah,
Yeah.
neither. But
So that's one thing. But there's another thing. You said now there's a thing called epigenetics, which takes us back to nature versus nurture, and how certain genes you can have them, but it's dormant. It's not really activated,
yeah,
and you can have a traumatic experience like a terrorist attack or maybe like a rape or something like that or a big fight, and that could be triggered. And now suddenly you have this condition that you never had before.
yeah. So genes typically aren't operating on an on-off switch. They are expressed, either a little bit or a lot. And what they mean by that is that genes get coded into proteins, and so they either make a lot of the protein or a little bit of the protein. And epigenetics is a non-genetic, a non-DNA way that regulates how much gets expressed, and it can be triggered by these really intense traumatic type events. So there's a lot of studies on the effect of sudden famines. I think it was either World War I or World War II, and it was, I believe,
You mean Stalin and Ukraine? Where
I think it was Scandinavia, but it was some country during either World War I or World War II that got their food supply pretty much cut off because of the war, and they suffered, prolonged famine for months.
yeah.
And it found that the next generation had, significantly different risk factors for things like heart attack and stroke. And what it is, it's just this little methyl group, which is CH3. So it's a carbon with 3 hydrogens,
Uh-huh.
and then it kind of attaches onto the gene, and it messes with the level of expression of that
So
gene.
so what happened to the next group, the next generation?
The next
of people?
generation?
Like what? Like they're more hungry or like
Um, I don't think they're more. I think it either.
their health decreased?
Yeah, I can't remember if it decreased or increased. I want to say it decreased.
Yep.
Their risks for heart attack and stroke increased. And the interesting thing is that first generation that experienced the famine, their kids had that, but then the next generation also had that. So the sort of middle generation passed on the non-genetic methylation of those
Do you,
genes.
do you think it's the same with smoking? He says it goes down like 3 generations.
I don't know, but there's so many things being studied now that I think will 5-10 years from now, I think.
Okay. So back to my original discussion, the epigenetics,
Yeah.
that has to do with like the environment. That's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
triggers these things, turns it on, turns it off. I know it's not that simple, but it does have a big factor to play in it.
It can have a big factor if it triggers these methylation of genes. And then the interesting thing is that gets passed down to the next generation. So it's inheritable, just like genes,
Yeah.
except it's not genes. It's just like a
It's-
little
it's-
chemical that's attached on.
But it's a code, right? Technically.
It's just a small little methyl group.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's a group, but it's in your genetic code. Like I give it to
It's
this person.
attached to your genetic
Yeah,
code,
yeah, it's
but it's
attached
not
to your
actually part of your. It's not a change in your DNA, but it changes the way that your DNA is expressed, and it's passed on through the generations.
Right. So there's people that do research now through meditation, different ways. Even if you take someone out of a certain environment, you could alter those. Not alter the genes, but the way the genes expressed.
Yeah, and you can do that. I don't know if that's specifically with like the methylation. I don't know what you'd call it, the pathway.
Yeah.
With-
I have no idea.
Or yeah, but even if it's not that, even if we're not talking about epigenetics, you can just change your levels of gene expression depending on your exercise, your diet, different things like that.
Okay.
And
Less stress, right? Stress is bad.
stress.
Some stress is good, but a lot of stress is bad for you.
Yeah, and so there's I've read some studies that seem to say that if a mother is extremely stressed during pregnancy, the child is more likely to be anxious as they grow up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how you're supposed to be not stressed when you're pregnant. Exactly.
I
So,
mean-
so it must be like, if you're
maybe you're-
super stressed.
Maybe you're in poverty.
Yeah.
Maybe you're in famine. You live in a really bad neighborhood where there's shootings. You're worried
Yeah.
about your baby. You're super stressed.
You'd
you
have
know?
to have those extra. Yeah,
Versus someone that lives in a middle class neighborhood
exactly.
and their stress level is, what am I going to do for the baby shower?
Exactly. And speaking on that, there's
My sister's pregnant, so the
Oh.
baby shower's like in 2 weeks.
oh, that'll be
Yeah.
fun. Good.
I'm not going,
Or
but
not go-
no, it's for women. I'm not going.
yeah. And well, with kind of related to that, there's now ideas of there's great racial disparities in health outcomes, and there's some thinking now that at least for specifically with people in the Black community, African Americans, the effect of slavery might literally be written not in their genes, but like in their epigenetics, and
Right.
that's been passed down, and that might be part of the reason.
Right.
I mean, obviously, there's huge societal.
So I actually read an article
problems.
on that. You know what it is though? Apparently, when they brought the slaves over from Africa, they didn't really feed them that much for 6 weeks. They
Yeah.
didn't really give them much water. They didn't treat them well at all. So the people that had to retain water more,
Yeah.
those are people that end up having diabetes because they like salt. They could retain water more. They made it. Some of the other people that didn't, they didn't make it. They died in the process.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about sort of a famine for a few months during a war. That's awful, but magnified times 10, times 100.
That's bad, man.
What slave trade did, and so it's I don't know of any specific studies yet done, but it seems entirely plausible that if like a famine of a few months can have an effect,
I'm sure it can.
Then-
People are traumatized from that, bro.
then something.
I've been through that. What do you mean? I've been through that because I was born in the Soviet Union. I came to this
Oh,
country
yeah?
when I was 6. So, but I
Oh.
remember the fall in 1991, dude. It was not only
In the
was a
90s?
famine, yeah,
Oh.
like 91. It was bad, bro. I specifically remember I was 4 years old. That's imprinted in me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I remember like just not having electricity. There's no food really, barely any food.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
Wow.
But I mean, like now that I'm here, like I appreciate this a lot more. Just having that. I mean,
I'm sure.
I'm glad I had that moment because it makes me a better person because I appreciate what I have now.
I think struggles are important for everybody
Yeah.
to go through it in some
Um,
form.
Have you heard of articles or just heard anything about people being able to just like through their environment shut off those certain genes? I mean, I've read a lot of studies, but I just want to pick your brain.
In terms of just shutting,
Not shut off
yeah,
the gene,
but
like shut off the condition of the gene that's causing it.
I haven't heard of anything.
No.
No.
Okay.
I know that through different, like diet and exercise and other, or through bad things too,
Yeah.
it can affect gene expression. But unless there's some sort of a mutation, the gene's going to do what the gene's going to do.
Well,
it just might do it more or less.
Well, the theory is, or the argument is, it's the environment, right, causing the gene to do this thing. So if it's the environment causing it, it's the way the person reacts to it, to the environment. Because I'm going to react to a different situation than you are. So apparently, through deep meditation, some people's theories is you could actually reverse that process. Because it's the choice. But apparently, you do it on a subconscious level, which is a different argument
Oh.
in its own.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's huge benefits for all sorts of mindfulness and
Yeah.
meditation and things.
But you're not too familiar with the shutting out
I-
portion.
I-
And that's all good, man.
No, I don't know like studies of it done.
Yeah, I'll send you a couple.
Specifically with like its effects on genes and gene expression, but it's just in terms of reversing some conditions or lessening anxiety or the things like that.
Well, on a basic fundamental level,
It's-
we know removing stress, exercising, clean up your diet is definitely going to help your genes, right?
Yeah.
Whether something's flaring up in your leg, you have a lot of pain, just going through that motion is going to help you out. Or
Well,
clean.
Yeah. No, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I've also noticed, like, because I'm in the health field myself,
Cool.
People that live in rural areas that work harder in life, like farmers, dude, they're just way healthier than people that live in like big congested cities.
Yeah.
There's a direct correlation.
We're meant to be moving
Yeah, we are. dude.
all day.
All day.
Maybe not all day, but most of the day.
Yeah. Working.
Walking,
Yeah.
doing something. Yeah, you see people go on runs and things, and it's I mean, running's great, obviously, but even just walking, standing up, doing. I bought I need to use it more, but it's an underdesk bike where it's
Mhm.
like real small, and you can put it on your desk, and you can kind of cycle
Oh,
with your
nice.
feet. So like instead of, I'm still sitting, but I'm getting some circulation.
Dude, send me that because I work on a desk job
Yeah,
and my
it's
butt.
rough.
I mean, I exercise, but it's 1 hour a day, and the other 23 hours, I'm literally sitting on my ass, bro.
Yeah,
I am. I'm either laying down and sleeping or just sitting on my butt.
yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, that does something. I could tell, dude. Like, what do they say? Smoking, sitting is the new smoking.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously an exaggeration,
I don't
But
think so.
but it's bad. It's
I
bad
mean-
for your health. I mean, smoking is still much worse, but sitting is not good for you.
yeah,
for
it just move
prolonged.
around.
Yeah, just
I agree.
like the standing desks, the underdesk sort of bikes,
Okay.
walking around. Yeah, I not that I do well at it. I sit most of the day.
Yeah, I
so.
did too, bro. That's just me. But hey,
Yeah.
tell me something.
Yeah.
You were talking off air about the freedom, paradox or something like that, as you called it, or free will. Sorry, free will.
Oh,
Yeah. Can you
yeah,
tell me
that
a
was
little more
totally-
about that? Like
I
someone.
mean, what do you want to know?
I mean,
that's-
like,
yeah. My
what is the
goodness.
argument of free will versus not having free will? Because I think that falls into
Um,
like simulations
Oh,
and the Matrix and things like that. Like, do people really
Yeah.
have free will?
okay. So with within philosophy, there's kind of three camps. There's three ideas.
Okay.
So there's libertarianism, which not political. It just means like freedom, basically. So it's like ultimate freedom. You control every action you do. Every action you do is like completely up to
Okay,
you.
like a libertarian in the government too. They don't
Yeah,
want.
it's
they
kind
don't
of
want
like
the
that,
government,
yeah.
Big brother.
Yeah,
Got
so
it.
it's similar, but it's
Okay.
yeah. And then there's hard determinism or just determinism, which basically says, the laws of physics are pretty set, and then that goes into chemistry, that goes into biochemistry, biology, and then into us, and it's just sort of, it's a set of steps. What happens now is a result of what happened previous, and so everything is just kind of predetermined. So we don't have free will. So that's why it's called determinism. So our actions are completely determined.
Okay.
And then there's a weird middle view
Mm-hmm.
that
I
says,
like that view.
that says both of them are true at the same time.
Oh. How could they be both true at the same time?
It's-
What's the middle view called? First of all,
the middle view is called compatibilism,
compatibilism.
or
Let's- Let me like. Okay.
So it's the two are compatible. So it says
the
yes,
Dream Party.
yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
like we are determined. Our actions are determined, but we still have free will in kind of a weak sense, but a sense that still matters.
Okay, I think I like that one.
Yeah.
Well, because people get into patterns. Humans develop patterns. They get comfortable, but it's also dangerous because that's what causes errors, and that's what causes people to be lazy and non-functioning. But you have the power to get out of that state.
Yeah. So that's one of the big things in compatibilism is that you're not necessarily like I don't know what a good example would be. Like if you just sort of like feel kind of thirsty, so you get up and you go and you grab a water.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't think to yourself, I feel thirsty. I want to get a drink. I'm going to go choose water. You just kind of get up and go get water.
That's second nature in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not like consciously like I'm making a choice of my own free will to select water over soda, over tea, over whatever. But then there's also different things that we seem to do have some control over, which is how we direct our attention, which can then change how our subconscious kind of acts, if that makes sense. So
Give me an example.
yeah, so if well, this is an example with changing your subconscious necessarily, but you know, you may not want to exercise or like choose to exercise on purpose, but if you purposely park at like the far end of the parking lot when you go grocery shopping, then you have to walk, all the way there, and so you're kind of tricking yourself into doing it.
Okay.
Or you want to.
What if I don't like exercising? I don't want to do it, but I'm like, hey, you know what? I want to be healthy, stay fit. I don't give a shit. I'm still gonna go do it. What does that
Yeah.
fall under?
What does that fall?
Is that
I
still
think
in the
that'd be
middle?
I mean, the determinists would say that was what determined you were going to make that decision.
Right, but if I'm determined I'm gonna make that decision, isn't that free will?
No, because it's predetermined. You didn't do it. Your biology did.
My biology did it
Yeah,
for me.
your brain, your everything. It just
Well, I don't know. I mean, damn, we could argue about this all day.
yeah. Well,
That's the problem.
It's one of the oldest problems in philosophy. And
Okay.
It's, yeah. It's. I mean, back to even Western philosophy, pre ancient Greece. And when religion, says people have free will.
Okay.
So it's.
Got
Because it seems like we do, right? They like.
It seems that way, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems that way, but like, do I have a free will to put on the car seat? No, I'm gonna get a ticket. So guess what? In order to avoid a ticket, I'm gonna put on the car seat.
Yeah.
So my free will is being taken away. So I don't have free will in that sense,
You have the choice to whether or not to get the ticket.
right? But
But you're being what do they say? Like you're being nudged or kind of like lightly coerced.
it's not lightly though, man. They'll put me
it's-
over.
Yeah, they'll pull you over, but you get a ticket. It's not like they're getting like no seatbelt, 5 years in jail. It's
I mean, if they did, then is that taking your free will away? Like doing drugs?
I think that gets into like just political.
Yeah. Okay, that's
Philosophy,
what. Okay. Nah, I don't want to get into that.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah. What is another topic about philosophy that you find fascinating? That like it's just definitely argumentable, dude.
One thing I've become really interested in is, with either the issue of like values in science and the debate on whether or not scientists should be like completely free of values, being like ethical, moral, political values when they do their science. Or there's some people who say it's fine to include them in certain ways, in certain cases, and science will run fine.
Yeah. Give me an example. Like okay, let's just say there's a scientist you said that just took blood from a bunch of kids at a birthday
Oh, yeah.
party. That was very unethical.
Very unethical.
Not only did he do that, he went and did the research and he like falsified the documents.
Yeah, Andrew Wakefield. He did.
Yeah. But what if he unethically went and took the blood from those little kids? I mean, which I don't think that's ethical.
No,
But
no.
but for the greater good of science, and you did some breakthrough research that's revolutionized science till this day. Like what? Can we justify that?
If you're a consequentialist in your ethics, if you think the consequences are the only thing that matters, then yeah.
You mean the end justifies the mean?
Consequentialists are like,
I mean,
do the math, more good. If minus 10 points for the taking not having consent for blood samples, plus 1,000 points, you come out to 990. Good, do it.
I mean, yeah, 900.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but
some very basic forms of utilitarianism.
Right.
There's more complicated ones, but some very basic forms of or like consequentialism.
right.
They really do view morality as kind of like a math.
Yeah, that sounds like the CIA, bro. Well, think about it. They did. You ever heard of MK Ultra?
Yeah.
Where they did LSD on
Yeah.
people involuntarily.
Yeah.
And they did it in San Francisco at like whorehouses.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So the prostitutes would give it to the married men that would come in, and they would just have a trip and they would study them. And these men wouldn't go talk about it to their wives or anyone because they're in the whorehouse. What are you doing in the
Yeah.
whorehouse?
Oh.
So, but that's for the greater good of science. Now, when they're looking back at that research, they're like, hey, dude, this stuff could cure like uh, different addictions, anxieties.
Yeah, it turns out it's actually
It's very beneficial,
be
bro.
very beneficial. And now we have
In a
like,
controlled environment, not at a
yeah,
nightclub.
and now we have like Harvard scientists studying
Yeah, yeah,
mescaline.
yeah.
Who would have thought?
I was actually in Peru like 2 weeks ago. People were offering me ayahuasca. I actually interviewed a lot of ayahuasca shamans. I didn't do anything because I've never done
That's
any
it.
of that stuff.
Yeah.
But I talked to a lot of people that were in the jungle afterwards, and they're like, dude, like there's something's been lifted inside of me. Like I feel
Yeah.
better. Like I had this depression and now I don't. I'm like, holy shit, bro! Like these two plants you put together, boom. And I mean, in America, that's a class 1 drug, so it's high. I mean,
Yeah.
it's illegal. You would go to jail for
Oh,
this.
yeah.
Like if I was to bring that one plant here, I would go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
But then yeah, you like this cures people. So
Yeah.
where's the how do we argue that?
So there's I've heard this problem called like the question of pursuit worthiness. Is this something worth pursuing?
100%.
Yeah. So is like there's some questions that you might think like would give us knowledge and maybe give us some good, but they could also potentially lead to some harm.
Well, yeah, even with those things, like if you take too much, some people can have really bad reactions and die.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it helps people. Dude, it's not even like a treatment, dude. It's a full-on cure, bro. You take it, you're done. That's it. You're good.
Yeah.
It's not like a medicine you take like every day or like once a week, and you have to get hooked on. The pharmaceutical companies keep taking your money. You just do it once and you're done.
Well, especially with I've seen there's been kind of a recent I don't know if controversy is the right word, but like the look into evidence of the whole idea of like depression is lack of serotonin. There's been look at a lot of studies now. Or some of the foundational studies of that may not have been absolutely right, and so this whole basis of depression treatment for the past decades of like we got to increase serotonin. There may not be actually that much clinical evidence that that's actually helps depression.
Oh man. So you're saying that research was swayed in a way?
Potentially, yeah. I don't know.
Potentially, kind of like what happened with Alzheimer's.
Yeah, I think
That one-
that one was deliberate. So
that
yeah,
one
yeah.
was
So
completely deliberate.
I don't know
bro.
the specifics of this, but it seems like it's not as sure as people thought it was. Where there was like serotonin is a key factor in depression, so we need to boost serotonin, and that'll
Well-
cure, help depression.
Right.
And
You
so-
studied science. How would someone come up with that and be so confident and say it, and then say, "Oh, it's not a key factor. I'm sorry, I was wrong." Like 10 years later, like how does that work per se? Do you know?
How does that person specifically? Or
I mean, yeah.
so
yeah.
I mean that's a personal sort of thing. So they would have to decide for themselves. Looking at different.
No.
Evidence and
As in
things.
like the scientist.
Yeah.
Let's say they looked at the evidence. They're like, I'm very confident, or like there might be some indication,
Yeah.
and then they just went off of that.
Yeah, and that's different scientists are people, and people have different
Yeah.
levels of
Morality.
morality and just levels of risk that they're willing
Yeah.
to take. Of like, this may or may not be right, but it seems promising, and I don't see the risks of going with this as being that big, and the potential payoff is really good. So I'm going to go with it. Other scientists might be more risk averse, and that's just one thing that could
Okay.
affect them. Yeah.
Okay. So they took the high road, and might have come back to bite them in the butt.
Yeah, maybe.
Possibly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
We're just throwing an idea out
yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, I get it. And
Yeah.
that's what's fascinating to you. That's actually really fascinating, dude.
Yeah, I think it's so there's a really interesting case of sort of values in science of not people bringing in. There's bad cases where like in the Soviets actually denied evolution because it didn't jive with their political philosophy. So their biology and genetics and their crops suffered for decades in the 1900s because they didn't accept evolution, because they just went, nope, that's wrong because it conflicts with their idea of equality or something like that. That's obviously not good. So like values in science
Yeah.
can be very, very bad. But then we have a case where there's people observing chimps and chimp behavior, and the it's i in the earlier days scientists were all men, and so when
Mm.
they were observing sort of the relationships between the female and the male chimps, they would see them through a certain lens, and then all of a sudden you have the first few female
Scientist.
primatologist scientists, like Jane Goodall is kind of the most famous. And when they observe the same exact things happening in the wild, they have completely different theories and hypotheses because they're women. They've had experiences in the world as women, so
Right.
they perceive things differently.
That's very true.
And so there's an idea from Helen Longino and Sandra Harding and some other philosophers of science, and this is like feminist philosophy of science, that's saying scientists can't be perfectly objective because we're people. We can't do that. So what we need is a lot of different perspectives to come together and work together, and then out of that we will get like a notion of what they call like social objectivity.
Yeah, but that's chaos, dude. You bring all those people with their ideology, their
Yeah.
mindsets, their religion, their uprising, their age, their gender, dude, and you try to get them all to agree.
Yep.
Oh, man, that's
Yeah. Well, I mean that's
yeah,
that's the idea. How you do that,
yeah.
different story,
Yeah.
but that's sort of the
The words
Yeah.
organized chaos
Yeah.
come to mind.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean universities are nice,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of different things going on, dude. You know.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. And the idea basically is whereas this one group of like men studying the behavior of male and female chimps was biased. Well, if you bring in the perspective of female scientists, you're going to get a better answer because you're getting different perspectives on that phenomena
I mean, I
that thing
agree.
that you're studying.
I agree. There should be
So-
more people involved.
So yeah, so it's it's kind of an interesting. It's not objectivity in the way that you think of like I'm free of biases and I'm just looking at the facts. It's more like I'm a person. I'm trying to be, as least biased as I can be, but I'm not going to be able to get rid of them.
Yeah. I read a book actually last weekend that said, "Would you rather have 1,000 scientific articles or evidence pointing to something, or one personal experience?" And pretty much everyone during that study said, "I would rather have the personal experience," because then they believe it, no matter what you tell them. Then
Human
Then-
psychology is very interesting
and complex. Yeah.
and very hard to get any sort of an understanding on.
Yeah.
In terms of scientific method, there's obviously been.
But that doesn't really apply to like consciousness and like human behavior. I feel like that's more like materialistic objects that we could like make computers, we could make rockets fly, we could make buildings. Like scientific method is awesome, you do this and this will happen.
Some philosophers of science will say that social sciences aren't actual science because they're not like physics or chemistry. And there's some philosophers of science who will say that biology isn't a science. Physics is a science. Math is a science. Biology is too
Too
complicated.
wild.
It doesn't have laws. It doesn't have rules. Like,
I mean, once you get into the subatomic level, then shit just starts getting crazy.
yeah, but they have like theories and stuff. I mean, I don't agree with these people, but there are people who kind of have this bias towards the hard scientists.
The hard
But-
scientists.
Yeah, the hard, like the physics, chemistry, biology, and then the soft sciences or the social sciences of sociology and psychology.
But I understand their point because it's not all paths don't lead to the same goal or ending. Versus
Yeah.
in hard science, you can actually get the same result.
Yeah, there's the big repeatability crisis in
Yeah.
psychology that is very real and probably not going to go away. Where people do an experiment and they go, okay, that's how that is.
Mm-hmm.
And 20 years later, somebody tries to do it again, totally different results.
Yeah, because it's
pe-
different people, bro.
because people are really complicated.
They are. But that's what I find is a big problem when people are trying to understand like metaphysical world, or they call it parapsychology.
Mm.
That's the class that it's classified under. Because it's just different people, dude, and like you cannot really replicate this stuff too much.
Yeah.
And then they're like, this is just like pseudoscience. When there's something there, but maybe we just don't know how to study it, bro.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big I'm open to those things in the sense of if we can study them, let's study them.
Yeah.
But if they can't, then I'm just sort of I'm agnostic. I just go,
Agnostic. Okay.
I don't know.
Well, I'm not
Maybe,
saying. I mean,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
I tell people I'm boring. Like I don't believe in ghosts or spirits or these.
What if you have
know.
one experience, one personal experience?
Personally, I would like to think that that wouldn't change my mind
Really?
because
You say that, dude. What
Yeah.
if you have one personal experience
it might it completely might,
and
but
it
I just
shatters your perception of reality?
yeah no I that might happen.
Let's get you some mushrooms.
There's exactly.
That'll definitely help.
There's
like half a gram, that should do it.
There's Francis Collins, who was the director of the NIH, who just recently retired.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know his upbringing, but at one point he became non-religious, and then he was out hiking one day, and he came across 3 frozen waterfalls, and it just like hit him, and he saw it as the Trinity in Christianity. And,
Wow.
like fell to his knees and wept, and he became Christian, like a born-again Christian for the rest of his life, and still
Interesting.
was like practicing science and didn't see a conflict between religion and science, which is the whole thing. But yeah, so like I'm not denying that like personal experiences can be huge, but it just without knowing what that would be like.
Yeah, it's very hard, bro.
And just, my bias, or I don't think it's a bias because I think science is reliable. So, like, I look to science for answers, and personal experiences aren't reliable all the time in
Yeah.
terms of these sorts of things.
I get it.
So-
There's this famous saying that goes, whether you want to phantom hell or soar angelic, just take a pinch of psychedelic. I love that
That's
saying.
a neat rhyme.
Yeah, it is. But
That's
it just
funny.
changes your perception. I mean, I don't know how much.
Well, and
I haven't done psychedelics, so
yeah, no, I haven't either. But I think in terms of like, different things that you're talking about, I feel like I can totally get on board with, and other things I just personally don't. So like changing perspective, of course,
yeah.
and but in terms of like having an experience and then being like, oh, we are all part of this one great being, and this all of our consciousness, all of our consciousnesses are connected through like this thread of
The ether,
golden fiber, whatever. Like
the ether,
people have things
the
like
force.
yeah,
That's cool though, bro.
it's cool.
Yeah, it sounds cool.
Which is why I say I'm boring, because like I don't.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah,
No,
that's
it's
what
all good, dude. But I need people to, or the world should have people just question everything.
Yeah.
Don't just take anything at face value, though. Like, even if people come and say, hey, we have evidence that we're all connected, then there should be people that should question it to the very end.
You should always be willing to re-examine your own beliefs in light of new evidence, which is hard because you're like, these are my beliefs. They can become part of your identity.
Not me personally. I mean, I have a wide spectrum of people on the podcast, like witches, and then people that are agnostic or atheists like you, and then like other scientists. I'm just trying to understand what's going on, dude.
Yeah.
I have my own set of beliefs, but
no, I think detaching yourself from your views to a certain extent is very helpful, and at least being able to do that from time to time, so that you can re-examine them.
Yeah. I actually had a witch tell me that. They're like, don't go in this with your own ideologies and your own mindset. They're like, just try to see it for what it is, and don't judge it, and just try to understand it. And I was like, all right, that's great advice.
Yeah.
Cool, man. That is all. Thank you for jumping on my podcast.
That was great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was awesome, dude. I
great.
learned a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, go ahead and subscribe, and we'll definitely catch you next week.